Welcome to Naresh Technologies. I'm Bangar Raju, and this is our continuation series of our ASP.NET videos. In these videos, let me demonstrate about ASP.NET server controls. What are ASP.NET server controls? In the previous video, we have learned about the coding techniques. In that particular video, we have used a button, and that particular button is a control. See, to develop applications, remember, to develop applications, what we are going to do first is we design a UI. UI in the sense, user interface. For every application, there is a UI using which the end user interacts with an application. And these user interfaces are two types. What are the two types? CUI and GUI. What is CUI? What is GUI? Character user interfaces, graphical user interfaces. And recollect yourself when you work with your C language and C++ language, or completely in the olden days, it is completely character user interface what we use. And today all our modern applications are GUI, graphical user interfaces. Windows is the best example for a graphical user interface. So like this, we just have user interfaces here. And CUI is right now outdated, and what we are using right now is GUI. And mostly 99% of the applications what we come across every day will be GUI interfaces only than the CUI. Okay, fine. And if at all you want to develop a GUI, if at all you want to design a GUI, you need a set of components or a set of controls. We need a set of components or a set of controls are required for them. What are that? Button, text boxes, labels, check boxes. Like this, we just require various controls here. What is the use of them? With that only we take the input from the user. Suppose I wanted to create a mail account, a new email account in Gmail. So let me open Gmail. If at all I'm going to connect to the Gmail, I'm just going for the create new account for Gmail now. So when I go for a create new account, you notice you're asking me to enter my details. What are they? My first name, the last name, username, okay, the password, the confirm password, all this things. Notice it. If you notice this, to enter all these details, see here we have some controls being provided. What is this? Yes, this is a control. This is a control where I'm just going to type my information. I'm typing the data in a control. What is the control? Text box. And after entering all these details, you have a button here, next. When I click on this, it is just going to log in into the Gmail server, and a new account is going to be created for me. Okay, fine. And see the important thing here. So to develop these type of applications, we require some controls. All these are controls. With these controls only we can develop the user interfaces. So in web applications, to design the user interfaces, we are provided with HTML controls. There are so many HTML controls that are available for us for designing a GUI, like button, text box, label controls, date picker controls, color changing controls, a lot of controls. And that particular button is a control. See, all our modern applications are GUI, graphical user interfaces. If you notice this, to enter all these details, see here we have some controls being provided. What is this? Yes, this is a control. This is a control where I'm just going to type my information. I'm typing the data in a control. What is the control? Text box. And after entering all these details, you have a button here, next. When I click on this, it is just going to log in into the Gmail server, and a new account is going to be created for me. Okay, fine. And see the important thing here. So to develop these type of applications, we require some controls. All these are controls. With these controls only we can develop the user interfaces. So in web applications, to design the user interfaces, we are provided with HTML controls. we are provided with HTML control. There are so many HTML controls that are available for us for designing a GUI, like button, text box, label controls, date picker controls, color control, color changing controls. A lot of controls are available, and you can make use of all those controls and you can design the UI. Okay, and ASP.NET is all about web application development only. Even though ASP.NET is all about web application development, in ASP.NET we never directly use HTML controls. The reason why we don't use is because these HTML controls cannot be accessed in our server-side logic. These HTML controls cannot be accessed directly in our server-side logic. When I am going to write any server-side logic, in the logic I cannot refer to the HTML controls directly. So to overcome this particular problem, we are provided with a rich set of controls called as ASP.NET server controls. Like whatever HTML controls we have, more than that, we are provided with some ASP.NET server controls. Okay, and these server controls are what we use in our ASP.NET. So today, let's try to understand about the various server controls and how to consume the server controls. Okay, let me open a new project. I'm calling it as controls demo, empty web forms project. Let me add a web form. Right click, add a web form. I'm not changing the name. That name is web form 1. And now, in the last video, I demonstrated what is this in ASPX file. And this ASPX file is going to have design view and source view. And right now what you have? Source view. And how to go to design view? In the bottom of the left hand side, you'll be finding a design. When you click on this, it will show you the design view of it. And right now it's a blank HTML page, a blank HTML form. We don't have any controls placed. I can place some controls. So how to place the controls? We'll talk about this. Okay, how to place the controls. In the last video, I have demonstrated how to place a button on this. Okay, watch. I want to place a button, or I want to place a text box. Okay, how to place a text box? ASP : text box. Okay, so what is this? This is to tell we want to place a text box. ID is equals to text box 1. ID is equals to text box 1. Okay, text box 1. What are the use of ID? See, on this web form, we are going to place more than one text box also. How many text boxes? N number of text boxes. Tomorrow I can have 10 text boxes. And every text box requires a unique representation now. If you want a unique representation for a text box, you require to give a name, and that name is what we call ID. And that ID should be unique always. Okay, fine. Run it equals to server. What is the use of run it equals to server? This is an attribute to tell this is an ASP.NET server control. This is an attribute to tell this is an ASP.NET server control. Okay, for all the server controls, we compulsory require to use this attribute called run it is equals to server. Then only our web server will go for dealing with the control. Otherwise, it is just not going to ignore this particular thing. If we don't have server, run it is equals to server, our web server will not recognize it as a ASP.NET control. It will just simply consider it as a HTML control. So that's why we should use run it is equals to server. Okay, and this creates a text box for us. And you can see the text box. Why? How? Go to design view. And in the design view, you can see this. This is the text box control. There's a text box control which is created for you. And beside this, I want to add a button. So I can write a similar code now to create a button. How? See me again. ASP : button. ID is equals to button 1 and run it is equals to server. Run it equals to server. There's a button, but button requires a caption. So let us give a caption. How do you get caption? Text equals to. Text is equals to something like click. There's a caption. And you can see that there's a text box here and there's a button here. Okay, so this is what. And now you can create this too by using our HTML controls also. By using HTML also we can create. Okay, let us see that. How do you do that? Input type is equals to text, id is equals to, give a different name, text box 2. Okay, and don't use that attribute run it is equals to server. Reason, these are not server controls to write run it is equals to server. For our ASP.NET server controls only we use this, and this is not an ASP.NET server control, this is a HTML control. How do we create? By using a tag called input. Next, beside this I want to again add a button. Same again, input, type is equals to submit, id is equals to some name now, submit 1. So here we call submit a submit button. Okay, and afterwards we don't have a text attribute here. Here the attribute is value. Value is equals to click me. Value is equals to click me. Now go to design view, and in the design view you can see text box button, text box button. Run. Yeah, you can see the 2 text boxes and the 2 buttons created. Okay, now listen. Whenever I'm just going to enter some value, suppose I'm entering my name here, and also I'm going to enter my name here. I'll tell you 2 reasons why we should use ASP.NET server controls than using HTML control. Reason number 1. Whenever I click on this button, all the data what is present here will be submitted to the server. That's what. You enter the username, you enter the password, click on the login button. What will happen? Your data gets submitted to the server. So just let me click on the button now. Click. And once I click on this, data is submitted to the server. Okay, now understand the first difference what we have between .NET server control and HTML control is, even after submitting the data, the value is still present in our ASP.NET server control, but it is not present in the HTML control. What is that? HTML controls will not maintain the state of the values. Once the data is submitted to the server, immediately they will be cleared off. The value gets cleared off here. But see, here the value is not cleared. This is the first advantage of using our ASP.NET server controls when compared with the HTML controls. Okay, so what is that? They have a beautiful feature called as maintaining the state of values, but HTML controls cannot maintain the state of values. Second, see, on the click of this button, on the click of this particular button, I wanted to write some logic. Last class, in the last video we have seen. So double click, and it will take us to ASPX.cs file, and it will provide a method called as button_click, and you can write the logic here. Okay, now when I'm writing the logic, I want to access the value of my text box 1. Okay, so I can call text box 1 dot text. I can access its value. Text box 1.text will return me the value of it. Okay, watch, string str equals to, what is this? Right, text is the value of the text box and the return type is string. So I'm capturing it as a string. I'm capturing this as a string, and I'm writing here response.write str. Whatever the value, I'm reprinting this on the browser. But I want to do the same thing with my second text box also. Okay, so text box, see, the text box 2 what I'm trying to access, if you watch carefully, you're not getting in the list here. Why I'm not getting in the list? Because the second difference what you have. What is that? ASP.NET server controls can be directly used in our code, but you cannot use HTML controls in our code. HTML controls cannot be accessed directly in our code. Then how do I access the HTML controls? If you want to access the HTML control, just a minute, I'm changing the name as str1 here. Okay, str2 is equals to request dot form of the name of your control. So what is the control name? It is text box 2 is the name of the control. So text box 2. Now it is going to return the value to you. String str is equals to. And now I'm writing response.write str2. Okay, and they will be printed in the same line. So just to separate here, let's say response.write. Let's give a break. Just adding a break there. For HTML controls, the attribute name should be ID, not ID, it is name. See, that's the reason why we did not get this. Okay, the attribute name is name, not ID. So here we call ID, but here we use the attribute called name. Okay, fine, come back, run again. Now you will get the value. I'm entering something here. Click both the two values. Okay, the mistake is that we just should use here attribute as name here also, not ID, it is name. Name is equals to. And for our ASP.NET controls, what we use? ID is equals to. ID equals to. Okay, so this is the second difference what we just have. What is that? We cannot access HTML controls directly in our logic. We cannot access. How you should access them? Request.form of text box 2. Request.form of text box 2 means, understand, it will give you only the value, that's all. It won't give you any other things. But here when I say text box 1, I can refer to the text of it. Not only text of it, I can refer to each and every attribute of this text box. Every attribute in the sense, the background color, the fore color, the font size, whatever you want you can access here. But here you can access only the text value of the text box. Other information about the text box cannot be accessed here. Okay, so this is the second drawback what you have between HTML controls and the ASP.NET control. That is the reason why it is never recommended to use HTML controls in our ASP.NET. What we use is only ASP.NET server controls. But one thing remember, all our server controls are rendered. What is that rendering? Rendered in the sense, we have created a text box like this. We have created a text box like this. ASP colon text box, ID is equals to text box 1, run is equals to server. But behind the screen, when the server is processing this, when a request comes to the server, what the server will do, the server will process the page, and after processing the page, the result is sent to the browser. So this is a browser. Browser is going to send a request to a server. Which server? A web server. And the web server what we are using is IIS web server. So now I want a page. When I want a page, okay, just a minute, let me run this. I will type in this URL to get the page. So browser is going to type in the appropriate URL to get the page. So what happens now? HTTP, localhost, port and web form 1. The request goes to the web server. What the web server does? The web server is going to pick out that page. Which page? Web form 1. And that is going to be sent to the browser. And in this particular process, the web server will execute all the logic or all the processing of the page will be done on the server. What is that? See, some code is not understandable to the browser. That should be processed by the server. After processing that code, the result will be sent to the browser. So what happens here, when the request came here, we have two ASP.NET server controls on your web form as well as two HTML controls on the web form. HTML controls are understandable to the browser, but ASP.NET server controls are not understandable to the browser. So what the web server does, the web server is going to convert our ASP.NET server controls into HTML control format and sends to the browser. And this particular process is called as rendering. What is it? A process of converting our ASP.NET code into HTML code. Why? Because browser doesn't understand ASP.NET code. What browser understands is only HTML code. For that reason, we will convert all our ASP.NET code into HTML code and send it to the browser, and we call that as rendering. The request comes to the server. Server will take the request, and after taking the request, what the server will do? The server is going to render ASP.NET code to HTML. We'll render this to HTML, And now after rendering this to the HTML, this rendered HTML code is sent back to the browser. So what receives to the browser, what is reaching the browser? The rendered ASP.NET code is reaching the browser. Okay, have a look. Right click on your browser and say view source, and in the view source you can just check it out. This is the render output. You can see here, input name is equals to text box 1, text is equals to text, and ID is equals to text box 1. Actually I said you, in HTML format what is required? Name is required. Name is required, so it is taking name. ID is also present. ID is whatever is present, that is also present, but still it will add this attribute called name is equals to. In the same way, input type is equals to submit, name is equals to button 1, value is equals to click me, ID is equals to button 1. And here we don't have ID attribute, but what we have is only name. But here we see name as well as ID attribute. But what is important? Name attribute is important. But in ASP.NET what is important? ID is important. In HTML, name is important. So that's why without confusion, here it will write off name to you, and here it will write off ID also. But both are having the same value only. They are not different. But see, the ASP.NET controls are now converted into HTML format and reaching the browser. Otherwise, browser will not understand. So this is called as render. Okay, so this is what happens exactly. So final output is HTML only, no doubt about it. But we don't use HTML directly. What we use? ASP.NET controls are used. So like this, we are provided with a very rich set of controls here. So many controls are there. So how can I know what are the controls available? Watch it. Open the toolbox window in the left hand side. If you don't find it, go to view menu, and in the view menu you can find out the toolbox. In the view menu you can find out toolbox. Select this. In this toolbox it will list you all the various controls that are available or provided for us by ASP.NET. Okay, you can just see they are arranged in the form of different group of controls. We call them as a tab, T-A-B. Okay, B stands for Bombay, B for Bombay. So basically what is it? In the form of tabs. They are arranged in the form of tabs. Now you see standard. This is the tab called standard. In this you will find all the standard controls that are available, like buttons, link labels, so many controls here. Okay, and see data controls, all the database related controls, validation controls, navigation controls, login controls, web part controls, next Ajax extension controls, dynamic data controls, and here you'll find HTML controls. What is it? These are our standard traditional HTML control that is also available. So you can see all the list of controls here. And see, right now to add a control, what did I do? I was manually writing all the code, ASP colon text box or ASP colon button something. But tomorrow in the real-time environment, if at all you want to design a web form with some 30-40 controls, writing all these things, it will waste a lot of time. So we don't do like this. How do we do? Watch. I'm adding a new web form, a simple web form. And in this web form, I want to have some controls. I want to place some controls. Okay, so open the toolbox and go to the appropriate group or appropriate tab which controls you want, and simply you can just drag and drop those controls. Suppose I want a button now or a text box now. Okay, see that, double click on text box, it is creating a text box to you. It is writing all the code. It is the same code what I showed you earlier, and it writes all the code to you. And I want a button. Okay, come here, click on a button. Button is great. Okay, and you want you're doing in the source view. If you want, you can design in the design view also. Design, see there. After this button, okay, again I'm just coming to next line. Again I wanted to add a text box here, so just going to add a text box here, and beside this again I want to add a button. Adding a button. You see the source view, it writes all the code. I used the enter key there to come to next line. It added me a break, and then created one more text box, one more button. Like this also we can just do. So this is how we can just use the controls. There are so many controls, and you can make use of different controls that are available. Okay, one way you can manually type the code. Second thing, you can just go to design view, or you can go to source view. Anywhere you can drag and drop the controls from the toolbox and design it. Okay, and the advantage of working with ASP.NET Server Controls is here. Two advantages. One, they maintain the state of values even after submitting the page to the server. 2. These controls can be directly accessed in our code, but HTML controls cannot be accessed in your code. And the third advantage is these particular controls have a rich set of properties, methods, and events available. What are those properties, what are the methods, and what are the events? Okay, we'll talk in the next video. Thank you for watching this. For more videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Naresh IT.